Hi everyone, welcome to Speakers Bank podcast, our voices, our views, our regular podcast edition. I'm Billy, and together with my teammates, Nathan, Storm, Annika and Georgia.
Hi everyone.
We'll be facilitating this episode this afternoon. Well, let's just get started with our first question. Did you want to ask the first question, or Annika?
Yes, I think our first question this morning was, could you explain the difference between informal and formal support, since we're covering supports today?
Glad you asked. So essentially, a formal support is anyone who has a call, is supposed to have some sort of formal qualification in care work, and it's generally someone who is basically a registered carer. So it means they either have a certificate in it, or they work for a company, or they're somehow a registered carer. An informal support is someone who looks after you, whether that be a friend or a family member, or a partner, son, daughter, whoever it might be, that doesn't get paid by a company. So, for example, my wife gets carers pension, and I think it's carers supplement, and I don't know what the other one is, because there's two. But my wife gets both the carers pension and the supplement, because she is basically with me 24/7. So basically, Centrelink will pay informal carers a pension, provided that they're with the person for, I think the minimum has to be 20 hours at least. So my wife more than qualifies for that, because we're together all the time.
Question on that. Sorry to interrupt. Just question on that. How do you prove that you guys are how do you prove the minimum? Do you have to fill out a timesheet?
So basically, how it initially works is you basically have to go through a form, and she has to tick off basically everything she does for me, and we have to literally work out. And this is where Centrelink is ridiculous, but I'm pretty sure from memory, I don't remember this for a fact, but I believe the last Centrelink form for carers that we filled out got you to break down every task you did for me in terms of percentage of the day. So basically, my wife and I had to work out, well, how long of the day are you with me, and for how, sorry, what I'm trying to say is, I'll rephrase that. My apologies. My mouth and my brain aren't connected today. So basically what you have to do is you have to sit down and work out, okay, how long am I with the person? You then have to work out of that day, how, many tasks am I assisting them with? What am I doing? How long are the tasks taking? It's quite arduous. Mm-hmm. And then, excuse me, you have to go to the doctor who signs a medical form, not only to certify that I actually have cerebral palsy, but they basically fill in the exact same questions. It's literally identical. Once that's all in, it then usually gets processed, and depending on how long you've said that you care for the person will depend on, your rate. So my wife, for example, she'd get the maximum, because, obviously we're married and we're together all the time. Whereas, for example, someone who, may do less might get a lower rate if they even qualify at all. The issue that my wife and I had a few months prior to marriage was that we applied for carers, and we were together all the time. But the problem was that because we would do 1 week at, my place, 1 week with her parents, Centrelink didn't kind of realize that. So they initially rejected us for carers, and we had to go into Centrelink and sign a statutory declaration form to clarify, so my wife could clarify that no, he is travelling with me, because the issue was that you're only, when you apply for this carers pension, you're only allowed a maximum of 2 hours travel time per day. Both to and from,
so how did you guys go and
so basically what we had to do was, because obviously like the Sunshine Coast was really far away from where I was living at the time on the Gold Coast, so my wife basically had to write a statutory declaration to say my boyfriend is with me all the time. He is with me, you know, constantly. He's actually traveling with me, and that's what they didn't realize. And it was a really easy fix. But the problem was that obviously no one, you know, clarifies that or rings up to make sure. It's basically you get rejected first, and then you have to appeal it.
There's another thing too. I just wanted to ask you, Nathan, if you're aware of it. Also, they cap for a carer's pension in Victoria. So a carer's allowance is not means tested. A carer's pension is, and they cap it at a certain amount. Especially if you're married, like my husband and I've never been able to get a carer's pension because his wage is above a certain amount before tax.
Correct.
Yeah.
That is correct.
So
that's
luckily
the other thing that's
and luckily for us, that's not an issue because you know, I happen to be on disability as well. But yeah, you're right. It would be much more complex. And the thing is, with when it comes to the carers pension, as you mentioned, and thank you for labelling those, because my brain completely farted. But basically, as far as I'm aware, there's a minimum amount of hours that you have to be with the person to qualify for the full rate. And if I remember correctly, it's something around like I think it's like 18 to 20 hours a day. So realistically, you can only, if my wife even was to be away from me, it's only like 4 to 5 hours. But you know, at the end of the day, they basically want to know, like, you know, they even want to know like things like, is, for example, the person that's caring for you volunteering or studying? Am I with them when they undertake that task? So obviously with my wife, everything was yes. It was just basically a miscommunication over travel, really, in our case.
What about you, Storm?
Me, I actually have a combination of both. So I have a disability support pension for my disability. And then I've got a disability carers pension for my mum, because my mum's my full-time carer. So I've got those type of supports. And then we've got, because there's some organisations that give us the concession rates when you're on the disability support pension. That's what you get. For example, the concession rate could apply to your water bill. I know that's one type of area where you can get concession rates from. I'm pretty sure there's
your electricity too.
Yeah, the electricity one as well. But I'm pretty sure there's a lot more than what I've mentioned. But I just wanted to give you guys a quick example.
I think in a previous one, you guys also mentioned that it could be used for transportation, right? For
that was
public transport.
That was with your companion card, which is not something you can get just straight away. You've got to apply for it. You can apply it on the telephone, on the internet, or any other areas that they say. But it's usually straightforward. But you've still got to provide proof, of course, and that's where the problem is.
I know when I was in
So sometimes the proof isn't enough. I know Kathryn had some issues applying for it a couple of times, and it was very, very difficult for her to get the companion card.
Yeah.
Because
and Storm, do you have to reapply on a yearly basis for that companion card?
no.
Or is it
So
a
as long
one-off?
as you don't lose the card and you update your details, if you move, you'll get one quite regularly.
Okay.
Usually it's
And,
like one every couple of years that you get a new one.
Because I don't know what their companion program's like in Victoria, but I know state by state it's slightly different. But with mine, for example, mine lasts about 10 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's
I think all
information.
the states are different.
Yeah.
But just to give the viewers a bit of an insight to what the companion card does, it gives you access to like a sort of like a carer's sort of like role. So, for example, if I want to go to a movie and my mum is there, or a carer that's a recognised carer that goes with me, that carer can get in for free because they're looking after my needs. So essentially, I still have to pay, but the carer doesn't pay. So that way, things can be a bit more easier, and it just makes payment a lot more easier for all of us involved. Because the government felt at the time that it was not fair that the carers have to pay for something that they're already taking caring of with that person. So I thought it was a really good thing from the government that they've been doing that.
Yeah, that was really fun. I did a brief stint in disability, and one of the clients that I had was absolutely addicted to going to the cinema. I think I saw every single movie that came out that year, and I didn't have to pay a cent, and he was like, come on, let's do it. Let's sneak off and watch a movie. Yeah. It was awesome.
Yeah, because the companion card also encourages people with disabilities to go out and about. So that's why I really encourage people who haven't had the chance to apply for it, please apply for it. Because it's a very, really good tool to get you out and about. We always say on this podcast to break down barriers, and that's one of the things that can break down barriers for you.
100%.
That's what I'll be doing soon. Applying for one of those.
I was also just going to mention as well, and feel free to edit this in when I do the definition, but I've done a Google search, and apparently it says it defines formal carers that are paid for their services and have training in education in providing care, whereas an informal caregiver, also called family caregivers, are people who give care to family or friends, usually without pay.
Right.
Your description was spot on.
And just so you know, with the companion card, it's not just movies. We're talking about zoos, we're talking about football, all other activities as well. So it's not just movies. There's a whole list on the actual website of what you can and cannot do.
Well, since we've talked about informal carers, what about formal? So we've got informal support, so we briefly touched on that. What about formal support? How can you talk us a little bit about your sort of formal support networks at the moment? We might start with Storm and then we'll go to Nathan because we'll swap from last time.
Sorry, I might have to get Nathan to go first because it's a bit confusing with the question.
Sure. So for the moment, I don't have any formal carers. That's mostly due to the house that I'm living in and the fact that I don't currently have room enough for an extra person to assist me with menial tasks. But when it comes to carers, there are certain tasks that I actually can't, and when I say I can't, it's not a preference. I mean, I really can't have carers undertake. So, for example, other than my wife, I can't have anyone, shower, dress, or shave me for personal reasons to do with PTSD. And so at the moment, but when I do have formal care, it'll be basically assisting me with menial tasks around the home, whether that be cleaning, admin stuff, because I've always got a form to fill in somewhere. My experience with formal carers is very limited, but one thing I actually do find having been married, is that when it comes to formal versus informal carers, when it comes to like the NDIS and various surveys and research, there's always the recognition of formal carers over informal. And I find that when organisations like the NDIS do reference informal carers, it's more to do with like parents or friends. Like I filled in a survey for the NDIS, I think it was quite recently, or it might have even been September, and they basically don't give you the option to put down, you know, spouse or wife. It's usually like when they ask for formal carer versus formal, it's usually going to be like, you know, friend, family member, or, you know, agency worker, or whoever it is.
Okay, so for me, based on what Nathan has just said, I've just had a light bulb moment, and I just wanted to share my thoughts on what I was thinking. So you know how in Victoria there's no like formal carers because of the lockdown? I was going to make a suggestion, just because of the circumstances. Why couldn't my informal carer, in this case my mum, get paid from the NDIS because she's doing the work that the carer would normally be doing? I know she's receiving the carer's support, but she's doing extra jobs that she shouldn't have to be doing.
Basically, so basically, as far as I know, and again, anything I say is subjective because I'm just piecing together the limited information that I know. So please do your own research, people watching in YouTube land. But the reality is that as far as I know, the reason that you can't have an informal support get paid for it is because, as far as the NDI is concerned, it's actually a conflict of interest for someone within your family to receive money directly out of your plan, unless it's like a reimbursement. So, for example, my wife and I looked into whether or not she could be considered be paid as a formal carer, and it basically comes down to qualification, it's policy, it's a conflict of interest. The other thing that I think that people need to remember is that there are certain circumstances where the NDIs can work around things or make exceptions, but as far as I know, the only time they will allow a family member to be paid a carer's rate directly from your plan is if you are in, say, the remote outback. You know, you might be living on a cattle station and there are no formal supports anywhere around you.
Yeah, it's like that movie that recently came out with Peter Dinklage and Rosamund Pike, the I Care a Lot, which was about that very thing where people were scamming. There was elderly people out of their money. I'm like, that's a good point.
I did see that. I think Storm 2, we sort of touched on that in the funding video as well, where we were having the issue with you were being funded for certain activities that due to lockdown you couldn't use.
Yes, correct.
Where it would be helpful if it could be transferred into a different set of activities, but they can't do that or won't do that.
No. So from my understanding is because it's not a recognised area in that sort of like funding pool, they're not going to move funds from that area. Yeah.
And
so they are very stubborn in that sort of instance. But I just think the NDIS has to be more flexible and understand that we're not living in normal times here. We're living in a pandemic.
Yeah.
So
2 years into a pandemic too. This is not like a few months.
Yeah. I know.
Just to go back and touch on what Nathan was saying about NDIS funding the carer or the informal carers, that I'm not sure if it's true or not, but that might have something to do with liability and insurance, because the carers...
I would say so, yeah.
Yeah, because, I mean, obviously the formal carers that you may get will all be under some sort of insurance policy if something goes wrong to them or the client, whereas it might not the other way around. Because I tried the same thing, Nathan, as you did. Like,
Yeah.
I asked the questions like, if I was, because I'm obviously the primary carer, or let's say one of my daughters, that was her job, just to care for him, for her brother, they said, no, that's not, they don't do that.
And I think that all leads into the next question quite well, which are the concerns or current issues you're facing with support. Who wanted to start with that?
So for me, because I'm receiving, I used to receive, formal support. I used to have 2 carers and all that sort of stuff. And how I did this was I went to my plan manager and I said, I want to get some carers to help with the workload with my mum and my sister. And they had to pick certain agencies, and I didn't know which agency to pick from because it's not a recognised thing at the moment. That's one thing that the NDIS should actually help with people with disabilities, because you should be able to choose your actual agency that you want to go to as well, but you need to know the research as well.
Yeah.
But the problem is you don't know the names of these organisations. So you can't really research is something you don't know the name of. So it all comes down to your...
huge plot, like a huge big oversight.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Wouldn't your support coordinator help you with that?
Correct, and that's what she did. But in terms of like knowing where everything is, I think it'd be a good idea for people with disabilities who have the ability to know that this is the organisation that's good for this. This is the rating for this. And I'm hoping with the Disability Support Gateway that we've got on the website coming up, I'm hoping that it actually lists some good like companies or organisations that help you with that. Because sometimes the disability, the support, the person that helps me to do the organisations to get me into it, sometimes it's a bad egg, and then we have to go through another one, and then another one until we get a proper
and you would like some more independence to be able to go through.
I understand that totally.
Yes, so it is very frustrating, and I'm sure Nathan can help him with this, is that when you try new things, you've got to explain them from the start, and then it just becomes I wonder what to do here, and I wonder what to do here, and then you got to explain everything, and then it just gets really, really frustrating because you just want to get on with your everyday life. And if you keep going visiting new organisations, you're gonna have to keep doing it, and you don't get into a routine. And that's really important for people with disabilities, is that they need a routine and they need to see the same people. But when you're constantly changing it all the time, and this goes with the exercise physiologists, this goes with the physios and the support carers that you receive, it becomes a very annoying habit.
I totally get where you guys are coming from, because I've been frustrated over the last 17 years and I've always said you need one person. Yes, if you need a backup, you have a backup, but that backup's not going to come in on a regular basis. We always need that consistency.
So I've worked with the carers service as well and found that most clients do have preferred carers. You build that rapport with someone, you'd rather stick to the people know instead of coming, going new person, and then you become more comfortable with them.
Exactly.
Would rather their service be cancelled for that day if the carer just
but the issue is that when your primary carer, the actual one that you want, is not available, there's no backup. So what happens is you'll miss out on your shower or your everyday needs, and then you're not ready for the day. And you get really frustrated because you're paying these guys for that service. It's not free.
Can I tell you, Storm, what I've done in my experience? What I've done is actually got a second backup carer that can come in once or twice a week, so that my son has seen her and gets to know her. But because she's a backup, I keep her on a regular day during the week, once a week, so that she's always there. But if I keep her as a backup and never have her on board, we may lose her. And then I have the lady who's been with us for nearly 15 years. But that's the problem. So if you get a second one, you want to keep him or her on at least once a week so that you've always got him there as a backup.
Yeah.
What about you, Nathan?
Well, I think the issue that I found, so I'll lay out, some of the experiences that I've had. When I have, prior to meeting my wife, like I was never comfortable having formal carers to begin with because of PTSD. But when I had to have one moving to Queensland, there were times when, the agency would ring me and go, oh, such and such can't come today, and it'd be like 2 hours before shift and be like, oh, we can't find anyone to fill the shift. And it'd be like, and what would frustrate me, Storm, is that I would have washing that needed to be hung out that I couldn't do myself. My clothes would then go moldy, need to be re-washed. And I'd have, almost like, this is an exaggeration, but a Gandalf-like beard because no one was there to shave me. And it was just, aside from the carer's personality alone, it was a terrible experience. But what I find frustrating with the NDIS, and I think this needs to change, is I actually think there needs to be more recognition for and support for informal carers. So, for example, right, my wife may be starting to get carpal tunnel in her wrists, and so she has to wear, wrist straps in order to continue to assist me. So I think, therefore, if you are in a situation like with me where you have PTSD around carers and you can't have one, so you're reliant on an informal support, there should be a small section in your plan with maybe a couple of $1,000 where, say, for example, if my wife needs a wrist strap or a heat bag because she's got aches and pains and whatever, she should be able to claim that, because the thing is, even the things that don't directly benefit me, so to speak, actually benefit me. So, for example, like if I went and bought a wheat bag for my wife, tomorrow, so that she could, heal faster in order to, bend over and help me put my shoes on, that still benefits me because it also assures me that I don't have to have a formal care worker come in. So either way, whether it's emotionally or physically, it benefits me, because whatever benefits her ultimately benefits me, and whatever affects her affects me. Like I've even said to a support coordinator in the past, and I'll be honest with everybody on the internet, the reality is I looked my support coordinator blankly in the face and said, if my wife's carpal tunnel got so bad that, she was no longer able to help clean me while we were both, showering or whatever it may be, I literally said to her, I literally said to my support coordinator, instead of having a formal carer, I would honestly rather get septicemia and die, because even someone, describing a scenario of a carer, getting in the shower with me instead of my wife, makes me want to black out on the floor, to the point where I've had to have, psychologist appointments. I've had to, I'm in the process of actually
looking. I'm sure you're not alone, though, in that.
Yeah, and I'm actually getting to the point where we're actually looking at putting together a positive behaviour support plan, so that basically what it does, Billy, I don't know if you have one for your son, but basically what it does is when you go to a psychologist or a psychiatrist, they basically lay out anything that would trigger, the person that or the client. So it basically lays out anything that would trigger the client with the mental health issue or PTSD. Like, so for example, a carer can't physically handle me, or they can't be in a certain room with me, or can't bring up a certain topic, and it might be anything like that. And the reason that I need that, and I'll be honest, I can't guarantee that if a carer triggered me or triggered my PTSD and I had a meltdown, depending on the situation and whether the person's male or female, I can't guarantee how I would react. So I can't say, for example, if it was a male carer, I can't guarantee 100% that I would, you know, in order to, you know, get away from them in the fight or flight response, I couldn't guarantee that I wouldn't, you know, have a meltdown, you know, shove them into the tiles, they crack their head, and then they end up, you know, in a state.
Both of you. It sounds like that something like that plan should be something that's mandatory just for the sake of
it is.
the client and the carers.
This is something that I'd like to touch on more in a further podcast, because we very rarely ever hear about mental health and disability.
Because the other thing is too, and I'd want to touch on this if you guys don't mind, if you can indulge me for a second. When I had my plan review and I got denied access for SDA, the plan reviewer said, well, you guys might be eligible for shared accommodation. Now, for my PTSD, that's actually a trigger, because I can't live permanently with anyone else other than, you know, my wife, because the reality is someone will come along if I'm share housing and they will trigger me. I'll have a flashback to, you know, somewhere that I used to live, and I'll react. And I said to this lady point blank, if you put me in that situation, there is every chance that I'll end up hurting myself or someone else, and you'll basically end up rotating clients or moving me on, because it's not worth the risk.
Yeah, and your needs should be first and foremost, both of you.
Yeah, but that's the problem right there, is that it takes time for us to get used to the care. So when you keep swapping and changing, it doesn't build our confidence, our self-esteem up, because we feel like we're part of the problem. When really it should be the other way around. They're part of the problem. Because when you go to the plan manager and you say, I want this carer, or I want a carer to look after me for certain days, they will provide you with a carer, but they won't provide you with like a massive sort of like background on the actual organisation, or the type of person that you are possibly going to get. So it's like a lucky dip. It's sort of like, am I going to get a good one, or am I going to get a good one? So what happened was, previously, before this NDO started, and this is what I liked, was we were in a council area in Werribee, and they would provide us with the disability care, and we really enjoyed that, because these were certified, qualified carers with police checks, with disability experience, with everything involved, and they know how to look after us for my needs. But ever since when we switched over to the new NDO system, it's been really challenging and really difficult in terms of finding the right carer. And when you do find the right carer, what tends to happen is that they'll move on to somewhere else, or something happens to them and then you never see them again. And then you're back to square one.
And I know exactly what you're saying, Storm. It does require like a lot of routine. Like, for example, when I go to the exercise physiologist, I get really nervous if, for example, he's not going to be there and I have someone else, replacing that person. And it's not because I'm going to have... And it's not because... And it's not because I'm going to have a meltdown. It's because, like, say, for example, if level 10 on a scale is absolute meltdown, like fight or flight, response, level 1 is like just a mild anxiety, and it's simply because I have ADHD, I tend to like routine. So if there's anything that upsets that balance, that's when I can get a bit thrown. And so I think, even in that regard, it's about, if you can have formal support, it's about getting used to, one person. And it's like, as I said to you guys earlier, when I do inevitably get a formal support, we'll have things in place. Like my wife will always be in the house, like the carer will only do certain things. There'll be a lot of boundaries in place. And what I find frustrating in all of that process is the NDIS doesn't really they'll fund certain things when it comes to mental health, but when it comes to, for example, my wife, they won't assist formal carers directly. So in a sense, they will give me a piece of equipment if it helps me, but they won't necessarily always factor in, okay, you know, what about his wife? Whereas I just want a support category where the NDIS can, you know, allocate a couple of $1,000 to my wife and say, okay, well, if you need heat packs or wrist straps because you got aches and pains, get them. Because at the end of the day, if she can't care for me, nobody else will be able to. And the other thing is too, and this, you know, comes down to the whole, you know, disability thing and stigma, is that what really frustrates me when it comes to like the NDIS, or if you fill in a survey to do with disability, when they ask you like who you live with or what your relationship to the person you're living with is, you get everything under the sun, like family, friends, you'll get like informal support, you'll get everything under the sun. But the one thing that's usually missing is partner or spouse.
Yeah.
Like,
that's really and that's really weird. It's another thing that I would love to talk about, like with we mentioned for the later podcast. Stay tuned for those listening. Where we talk about like relationships and dating with disabilities, and there's like literal government oversight in that arena, which is crazy.
Yeah, because the thing is, Georgia, there's a lot of, you know, recognition for, you know, and this is just something that I've observed, and I don't want to cause offense to Billy at all, but I find that it's one of those things where I get that, you know, parents that have children with disabilities get, you know, recognised. My mum was, you know, one of those, but I find that there's no recognition of, even if it's only the 1 or 2%, there's no recognition of, you know, those that have disabilities and have an able-bodied partner. It's almost, for example, as if the way my wife would describe it to me is like this, right? Say you have someone who's had a spinal injury and they've had a partner previously. Everyone will basically say to that person, oh, you know, how can we support you? But then when you get someone who's had a disability their whole life and my wife willfully chooses to love and marry me, it's almost as if society kind of says, well, you chose him, therefore you have to live with the consequences and you're basically, you know, on your own. And I think
I'm going to stop you there, Nathan, because if we keep going, we will be here all day, because that is such an interesting conversation. And I want to bookshelf it in so we can put a whole podcast towards that sort of stuff. Is that okay? So we might wrap it up for today, but I just wanted to say thank you so much. We've had some like really brilliant perspectives today. So like, good job. Woo. And we'd like to say, Billy, did you want to bring us home?
Oh, well, I was just going to say thank you to Storm and Nathan. Thank you to you ladies. Very informative, lots of information. I hope everyone's taking a lot of this in. It'll be great for them. Yeah, lots of information, and unfortunately we do have to wrap it up. On behalf of Speakers Bank, thank you all, and we'll see you at our next podcast.
Take care, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Thanks, Nathan.